Good afternoon, everybody. You may notice that this is me, Giles Edwards, and what you're listening to or watching, or probably both in one of the cases, is Pod 366, a Weird Movies podcast. Greg Smalley isn't here today. He's been called away on business pertaining to the Big Book Project, but I'm delighted to be here hosting with Richard Bailey, a filmmaker we spoke with. It's already been half a year since his last feature, and we chatted back in February. Richard Bailey, hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me back.
Well, thank you for coming to join us. Eventually, we'll be discussing Richard's latest feature, which is either out soon or out now.
One of those. Now. It is out now. Yeah, as of Tuesday, it's out.
Oh, fantastic. As of Tuesday, out The Dark Sisters. We at 366 will be reviewing this, and that review will be showing up next week. But before we get to that, and before we even dwell on that movie too much, we're going to give you the other upcoming news of the week in the world of weird movie releases. And so, having done a little dry run a moment ago with the guest here, I'm going to attempt to share my screen so that we can get some images coming your way. And I click that, and let's see. Do you see an image, Richard?
I do. It worked out great.
Fantastic. Now, normally Greg likes to challenge me to describe what I'm seeing, but I'm wondering if you might be interested in taking a crack at describing this picture in front of us.
Well, it's the one and only Barbarella, Barbarella Psychedella, as the song goes, and there she is. This great, looks like animated portrait of Jane Fonda as Barbarella with her scant costume and large weapon. Looks like there's a spaceship going down in the background. Her nemesis, Anita Pallenberg, no less, in the background in black and red. We're on a planet, looks like a lunar surface with the Earth in the background. And it's a busy-looking poster for a busy-looking visual feast of a movie.
That is very appropriate. And this is yet another good reason for our friend and admin and site founder to get himself a 4K Ultra HD player and compatible television to fully enjoy the incredible quantity of background visuals, foreground visuals, and from my recollection, just about everything on screen being nice, vibrant, and a little odd, and certainly late 60s. So, Barbarella, it's coming out in beautiful form. I'm going to take a quick peek at one of my dozens of tabs here. It is a 2-disc limited edition, which suggests, oh my word, a whole bunch of extras. Well, we have audio commentary from a probably known film critic named Tim Lucas. And that's, an isolated score, which is actually probably no bad thing. That'd be a good background party piece there. Just have the image and music rocking along for your Space Lounge do coming up, maybe for the new year. And disc 2 is just really packed with stuff. Anyone familiar with Criterion or Arrow or Shout is they just seem to have found just about everything they could put on here as an extra and did it. So this looks like, until we get up to 8K 16 or however it's going to go, will be the definitive copy for you to get your hands on. Now, Barbarella is something that many of us that know about have enjoyed, seen, and as much as we could made sense of. Less can be said about this phenomenon. Richard, what do you think that is?
That is Godmonster of Indian Flats. And there in the center, we have, an appealingly odd-looking drawing of the Godmonster, which is a sheep in the film that has undergone some hybridity that makes it monstrous, although also an object of compassion for some of the characters. And there beneath, also sort of drawn in pencil, looks like is a variety of our cast, anyone from the more villainous developers to some of the folks who are more hospitable to the Godmonster, and this orangish background that suggests the ecological disaster that might be looming when creatures like this come into play into the world.
Now, I take it sounds like you've seen this movie.
I have.
Okay, I have not. I refreshed with a review of it and was reminded that, oh my goodness, that sounds bizarre. Now, do you think this is this should happen as a DVD, right? This is a kind of thing that should try to get out to as many people as possible.
I think so. I'm going to attempt, if I've got a moment, to try to make a case for it. It is an odd movie, and for some reason, it is a mystery to me why I have such a warm hospitality for it. I'll try to explain that. One is, for me, experiencing movies, 90% of my enjoyment or disappointment arrives out of photography, the images that move themselves. And the director of this movie, Hobbs, I think it's Fred Hobbs, was also a visual artist in his time. He made strange abstractions and these mobile sculptures, these chariots, he called them, that were motorized and moved around, odd-looking features that moved in odd ways. And so there is a sensibility, behind this movie. And his director of photography, William Hike, who did a couple of feature films, but was mostly known for his camera work for indigenous rituals and things like that. So he was out of the documentary realm and had a lot of experience photographing some unusual activities and the religiosity and the cosmology of indigenous people. So they come together to make this horror movie, and I'm not sure how they agreed upon doing it. I like to think in my mind it's that great proposition, one person to another, hey, let's make a movie, and let's involve, the legend of the Comstock gold and other things too. So there's the tension for me is this pull between experience and innocence. There's the experience of these people who understand images and think about images, and there's also the innocence of this not necessarily convincing looking monster that they feature a lot.
That's very diplomatically phrased from the screenshots I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, there are some. I mean, the features of the landscape, are really good. Obviously, there's something of an ecological message, and the landscape is terrific. There is actually, some very good. They've got a lot of group shots that are pretty well accomplished. There's in the 366 review, which I liked and gives people a good overview. I think there's one comment in that review that I thought was just a bit inhospitable. The idea that it's utter incompetence on parade. I think the frustrating thing, or the delightful part for me that I suppose leads to some frustration, is there is enough of effort, toward making something of a photographic interest that is underscored by this blind spot that they don't see necessarily how ineffective their creature is. There's just, I don't know, there's an innocence of that just kind of opens my heart to their endeavor a little bit. And maybe that's what kind of gets me through it with some enthusiasm, where others might be less inclined to find enjoyment in it.
Yeah, okay. No, I got you. Yeah, checking out. Yeah, I read the review just before we began here. And yes, it does kick off with the sentence, like the very best of truly bad movies, Godmonster is a whole lot of incompetence with a thick, nougaty filmmaker's vision in the center. And that's that kind of sets a tone that might not be ideal. It was brought to our attention with almost that kind of phrasing verbatim from one of our readers, so that may have biased us. But overall, I think the review tries to do as much justice, perhaps siding from a slightly more typical viewer's position, which isn't our thing anyway. So I couldn't explain it further to you there, but your breakdown was most gratifying to hear. And with that, we're going to shuffle on to the next thing here. This is much, much, much more mainstream. I haven't seen this either. But what we got here is another Ultra HD Blu-ray thing coming out, 4K, bonus materials from Marvel Studios. So a very different beast than the Godmonster one. Do you have any thoughts on the Wanda Vision phenomenon, Richard?
Well, on this one, no, I don't have that streaming service, unfortunately, and everything's so proprietary these days that so I haven't seen it. And I'm not as familiar with the Marvel universe to understand just what the bizarre twist is with these characters. I mean, I applaud the invention of showing familiar characters in a very new sort of light, involving I guess a sitcom. I guess a sitcom that sort of quavers in and out of sitcom land and hero land.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting, but I don't know enough about the lore or the particulars of these characters to really jump in too much on this one, I'm afraid.
Okay, yeah. Well, we have it fairly well covered with Shane Wilson's review from a couple years back when the TV show first showed up on the streaming service. That's Disney Plus, for those who may not have known. And he seemed to have broadly good things to say about it, and has his wit and thoroughness that I couldn't hope to replicate. So I strongly recommend that if you're remotely interested, you check out what Mr. Wilson has to say, and be assured that if you don't have Disney Plus but think you might want to get this anyway, it's available now for you, 4K Blu-ray with some stuff thrown into the box. So that's all well and great. And I guess we're going to veer back in a differently outlandish direction here with this cover of 4K Ultra HD. What are we looking at, Richard?
Oh, we're looking at Bloodsucking Freaks, which
Good.
has a variety of images here. Anyone familiar with at least the premise of this movie, kind of gets what's being alluded to here. There's a woman at the center of it coming out of the blood red letters and the dripping sort of font of blood-sucking freaks, and she has her hands up in the air. They look to be somewhat tethered at the wrists. She has this look of intense pain, tears from the eyes, and her torso. There's a position there in that flesh of a sinister character and another tormentor just over her shoulder. So they're beneath and they're above two sinister looking people who are, and I think that's the gist of this whole movie, women in very precarious situations involving undress and male tormentors. They're all around them.
Yeah, I'm not sure what screen you may be looking at. I have a big screen here, so to explain the look of anguish, the tormentor above is holding an eyeball that I'm guessing came from the socket, which I'm sure there are tears there, but the streaking is blood colored there. So something among the any number of unhappy things happen to the victims in this strange film that our Greg Smalley reviewed, oh gosh, about 10 years ago, having wanted, he told me in an aside the other day that he kind of wanted to avoid this, but there was enough clamoring for 366 to provide our 2 cents about it, and he was, shall we say, appropriately dismissive of the effort. That said, I suppose I can't really be one to judge because, once again, I haven't seen this. So I know it does have its fans, and I certainly don't begrudge them enjoyment in fictional narrative cinema. It's, that's there's all kinds of stuff out there for all kinds of people. And yeah, we 366 makes its views known in our review here, but for those who want to ignore those views or those who want to spite us, coming your way is 4K Ultra HD, and I'll just zip through a few of the bonus features on here. It's restored 4K from its 35 millimeter internegative, which is just within my understanding of the technical side of this. So it should be the best picture that we could realistically hope to get our hands on for this movie. There are some commentaries, one of them by John Spoonar, author of a book about this movie and the director. Bless you, Kat. Various archival cast and crew interviews. There's reversible cover artwork, which is something I always enjoy in a DVD release because, usually the flip side, there's something actually interesting going on. I know, for instance, with the A Field in England movie, the nice Blu-ray edition of that, he flipped that over. He's like, look at this wonderful psychedelic thing, which replaces the more static imagery on the front. So I will now admit I'm vaguely curious what the other side of this leaf looks like, but I imagine some poking around will show me. And of course, there are some things, as you might expect, from the Troma people who had various things to say about this movie at points over the years. I believe there was almost certainly an earlier straight up just DVD back in that wonderful time when film distribution became digital on disc, and all of a sudden all these extras came out of the blue that used to be limited to the very tiny Laserdisc crowd. So this is full of stuff. You'll know if you want it, and if you already know about this movie, you probably have already purchased it. So that's out now for your enjoyment, and we'll move on to something that I haven't seen.
I've seen it.
Okay, well then, if you might tell us some thoughts you might have, certainly on the image and then on the film itself, if you would.
Yeah, Astrakan. It's a powerful motion picture, and we've got looks like a burned image into parchment, perhaps is what the look of that is. And the young boy at the center of the movie, his name is Samuel. He's a foster child, and one of the features in the movie is this car trip with different driving scenes with different family members and his relations with different foster family members, and his reactions and relations with those. We see some of that, and this beautiful set piece of riding bikes that also appears within the movie. And it is one of those movies that I don't think it's, or I hope it's not off-putting to say that I admire tremendously. Enjoyment might be a different, sort of reaction to it. And so I wouldn't suggest that I necessarily watched with great enjoyment, but with great admiration. And I saw the review that's on the 366 side, and I'll defer to that for a lot of the plot points and stuff. But one thing that stuck out to me in the review and in my own watching of it, there is this shift. I mean, for the most part, it takes place it's a French film. It takes place in a bucolic place, so the pictures are wonderful, and it also concentrates on the hard lives of the people who live, in this beautiful setting, who make their living remotely, on farms and barely cobble things together. Samuel's experience is that he's a foster kid. Among other foster kids, apparently the state rewards couples for taking such difficult children in. So he's also a source of income for the family there. So it's not a foster relationship necessarily based out of, love and care for the child, but there's he's commodified in a sense. But one thing, I'll leave it to the review to really explain it, because I think I like the review. But one thing that the film does that I think that is extraordinary in this buildup, of showing us this kid's life, there is a turn, toward the end where, although the rules of the filmmaking, how it's set up, how the shots take place, the velocity of it, the shot duration, all these things are set, and we get a rhythm for it. But then those rules don't necessarily change, but the logic of the film sort of warps a bit, and we're shown these images, sometimes alternative points of view from a previous scene. It's almost like a montage. It's mostly silent, and we see a very different sort of telling of the movie, and it's really magnificent. It's really thoughtfully done. I think it's Greg who does the review, and he makes the case for it being a weird movie, and certainly it is narratively an alternative type of movie, but it's a hard movie to see. It approaches some hard subjects, but in the end, there are rewards, and particularly if you're like me and you're moved to ideas by the photography in movies, there's a lot to a lot of lessons that one you can take away from watching a movie like this.
Excellent. Well, for those of you who are intrigued by Richard's remarks or our review and want to brave this, good news is that against probably some number of odds, it is streaming on Mubi.com. So you can check it out there and find out just what Richard and Greg are talking about with Astrakan, a somewhat 2022 French film from, where'd the director's name go? David Depesseville. So that is now available on Mubi for your admiration, if not enjoyment. And we are now winding down to the final title on our weird releases listing. This is a movie I've actually seen. I saw it 2 years ago at Fantasia Film Festival. Richard, you've been great at this. Would you care to describe this image for this film?
Boy, it's a stumper. It's it looks like a series, either a window pane view or a series of photos sort of cobbled together. What might be two streams of light, or a highway, or perhaps that's the comet itself. It's a dissected view of a sort of whoosh that suggests something cosmic, and at the same time an overhead view of maybe a passage of sorts. I'm positive I'm getting this wrong.
No, there's a ambiguity. I'm guessing you haven't seen this. This is Happer's Comet, which we've, it seems like on this podcast, we've mentioned this a lot. So I guess it's just sort of had a wonderful slow drip feed of different types of release. It's now available on DVD, and as with this, as with all the other ones, links will be provided for your convenience. This is from Tyler Taormina, who did Ham on Rye, which caught our attention a few years ago. I watched and wrote the review for that as an Apocrypha candidate, as a strange sort of coming-of-age drama. Happer's Comet is his nebulous follow-up. It's 62 minutes, takes place entirely at night, and is dozens of little vignette scenes that are given virtually no context. There's an impression that all of this might be happening in the same town. There is a focus on the night sky, as the title of the film would suggest. And it was the kind of thing that watching with a crowd was an odd experience because of the way it was edited, the overall just sort of dark nighttime feel of it. There was a trance-like effect with me in this group, dim room, and these uncertain things happening on screen. So it was a very peaceful experience to watch this, even if it, you know, I can't really say much of what is going on there. So it's a real mash of vignette kind of thing, each thing being a minute, couple minutes long. The movie is only an hour, and I described it at the time as a compliment to it, that this might be a perfect film to fall asleep to, because there's all kinds of neat little things going on in the background. There's movement, but none of it's harsh because it's all, you know, dimly lit houses or exterior shots. And I imagine repeated viewings might reveal more of more precisely what may be going on, or what is tying all this together. But it's kind of like a quiet version of a quiet domestic near-realist Koyaanisqatsi-esque thing, where it's like, okay, these things are happening and it's okay. It doesn't matter. This is what's going on, and I'm showing this to you, and we're, you know, observing it. And what point do you need? Well, that's an entirely different discussion kind of thing. So which makes me think, actually, Richard, you might enjoy checking this one out, because
I'm impatient to look into it. Yeah,
definitely. From my experience with the two films of yours that I've seen, you are very much a editing and slow moving shot kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And this is very much in that sort of just that sort of vein, where you're just all they're asking the audience to do is observe in this scenario.
Yeah, for the previous film, Hammond Wright, do you know if that had anything to do with the Bukowski novel, or is that just
Yeah, it was based on the Bukowski novel. Let me.
okay?
Yeah, I'll find out in a moment when I saw that. That was spring of 2021, so about 2.5 years ago now. And yeah, a large group of teenagers gathered together at a restaurant for an assembly to determine their future. So yes, it is based on that, and it's a really neat little. That's a much more despite the incoherence that eventually occurs. It's that one is a much more straightforward film, certainly, that will be familiar to anyone who's seen, like, a teenage kind of romantic overtone kind of melodrama thing. So that's one I can, more shall we say, emphatically recommend to people seeking narrative in their film. Ham on Rye, there is one. Whereas Happer's Comet, it's a mood piece kind of thing. So yeah, I'd say both of those, Richard, would probably be worth your time in viewing there. So that wraps up in good time, probably because we've got such a slimmed down crew of people today. The first bit of Pod 366, the 1st of December episode. What's going to happen is moments from now, you will see both of us again in roughly exactly the same positions. But we're going to take a little break as we jig up a new meeting. So, Richard, I'll see you soon. Everyone, I'll see you immediately. Hello again. With me still is Richard Bailey, who recently, wrote, directed, probably produced a little bit, certainly the all-around behind-the-camera guy for the feature film The Dark Sisters, which is out, as he mentioned, as was mentioned in the first section of this Pod 366 Weird Movies podcast, is out now, available for your enjoyment, and I will say edification. So, Richard, I'm going to ask if you might kick off going in depth as you may prefer to. There is a lot you're saying in this movie. There are a lot of ideas being conveyed in a relatively brief runtime. Would you perhaps explain the genesis of certainly the framework that you're hanging your thoughts on here, and overall what brought you to this, and how this came about, if you would?
Yeah, it started. My wife and I took a trip to out to Caddo Lake, which is the one natural lake in Texas. It's on the border between Texas and Louisiana. And the only way really to describe the features there is it's positively prehistoric. The water in this lake it's actually quite a shallow lake, but there's a dark surface to it. Black surface, perfectly reflective of the cypress trees and the Spanish moss that hangs over. There's a variety of growing things, a lot of it on the surface of the water from lily pads and stuff. Remarkably, it's an undeveloped place, perhaps owing in some small part to the demeanor of the folks who live out there. You don't mess with them, right? And so it's a quiet place, but also I shouldn't jest too much. A very welcoming place, a hospitable place, but undeveloped. So it's quiet. So we would. My wife and I went out there at an off season. There was no bass tournaments or anything going on, and we were just amazed by it. And for me, it is possible for me to just be in nature and enjoy nature, but there's always a part of my brain that's wondering about photographing nature and working from narratives of that. So it was sort of a working vacation. Quickly, it became for me, as we took our trips and our boat rides and stuff, it's like all the narrative possibilities. And for me, something that I've been exploring in all of my movies with the narrative that kind of drives them all. They're all, I suppose, the different movies arrive from me thinking as a dramatist about this particular idea, that there is a dimension within our personality that cannot be controlled, but it is definitely there, and it is susceptible to a variety of influences from the natural world, from other people, whether they are attracting influences or perhaps sinister influences. And this dimension then controls behavior, so that sometimes we might find ourselves acting offline, or perhaps just losing it, or out of ourselves, for a moment. Now, I'm not a psychology student. I'm not trying to suggest that, that there's I'm speaking clinically, but as a dramatist, there's a possibility for this. Unless I'm speaking too outrageously, most people would sort of agree that, yeah, stuff like that, can happen. We're open to a variety of influences, and sometimes we are operating outside of our own control, so it seems. So I wanted to come up with something, that was good for this particular type of environment. And the story is these two sisters named Caden and Jory, who had a dark secret in their past that drove them away from one another. And they come out to this retreat on the lake to reconnect, or to try to. And Jory, the both of them have somewhat literary careers. And Jory, I suppose the more accomplished of the two, has decided that the way for us, to really come back together is to somehow supplant this dark secret, that we share. Spoiler, it involves a murder.
That's made kind of clear pretty early on. So
yeah. They get away with it, and one can put their ideas of whether or not that's deserved or not, but they get away with it, and they go on to their lives, and they have these very separate lives. They reinvent themselves. And so Jory's idea is that if we're going to supplant this dark secret, and create a new, I suppose, origin story for ourselves, then we will do that, here. We'll make a new start, a new creation start in this very primordial, prehistoric looking place, this Eden of sorts. Well, back to my point earlier about the mind, or that dimension of the personality that's being susceptible to various forces. Nature has its own idea of sovereignty and justice. Nature comes to us is personified by by a trickster and a magical character known as the hunter. The trickster is the thief, and they come into the narrative in, I hope, surprising and delightful ways. It's all a poetic rendering of a very old story about the degradation of an idea. Oh, let's go out into the woods and start anew. Oh, well, that doesn't happen. And instead of giving a sort of linear backstory for everyone, or dialogue that approaches conventional ideas of reconciliation, we all approach it in a rather poetic and musical way. The story is there; it's a pretty basic plot, but we took the opportunity to heighten reality a little bit, and the point of that is to, I suppose, fill this magnificent natural space with dialogue that is equally evocative of a variety of images, psychological images, various torments and passions, from the characters, and to try to give as much to the language as possible that might match and sometimes create tension with some of the more natural world montages that we're seeing on screen.
Yeah, no, great. That covers a lot of the key points that I was pleased to notice, and I also know that the co-host who couldn't make it today has seen this, and what stood out for him, and I'm going to mention now, is the dialogue and not quite narration, but a lot of voice over these various natural images, as you just mentioned here. A focus being more poetical than natural, we'll say. There's a style to it that isn't the free flow conversation that we all learned and loved from On the Waterfront when they first started making lines sound like they might be delivered by people, kind of thing. And so there's a considerable emphasis sonically, I felt, on the poetry element, with in particular a number of moments where it's a repeated sound that is attempting to achieve a purpose, as opposed to the direct meaning of the word in this. In the most obvious case, the word chop, which had its charming incantation once or twice, I remember. But a focus on the sound and it combining with your chosen image there. Now, writing this script, what was that sort of process like? Was a lot of the Dark Sisters come out as you planned it, or did it morph as you were assembling it, having made recordings, done screen captures, worked with the actresses and so on?
No, I hope this doesn't sound like I'm speaking immodestly, but I think we nailed what we wanted to do, from the script, from the get. What I try to do, when writing it, of course, one wants to interest actors, to come on board with it. So I try to make the script as evocative of all of the horror and absurdity. I suppose I left that part out. I mean, it needn't sound so serious. There are some the spooky elements to it, and there are some a few humorous qualities.
Pastor Weenus was great.
Yeah, yeah, some stuff like that we tried to do, but I try to make it is so that there is no. So for the actors, when they're looking at it, that they know what sort of tone we're in, when they're doing this movie. There's not a lot. There might be some ambiguity in the way that the character is speaking about a particular experience, or the type of influence they're under, or perhaps a trance is another way of describing what I was trying to describe others. Sometimes we're susceptible to these trances or working offline. Some of that might be mysterious to the characters, as of course that might be, but I try to make it onto the page without overloading, with technical speak, about what it's going to look like, So I was pretty well inspired and hit the story pretty much immediately after that vacation that my wife and I took, and put that on paper pretty quickly, and it all happened pretty quickly. We shot it. I mean, I say this basically as a way of speaking to other filmmakers who work like me, who with micro budgets and who independently produce. It was 777, 7 people, 7 days, $7,000. That's what we had to work with. But it wasn't a haul. We planned it for a year. I suppose, to get back to your question, so the actors, once we got out there to the location, they knew, who they were as characters, maybe not real people, but in service to this story, this vibe that we're wanting to make, and so everyone knew what they were going to do with that. And if they had questions about their characters or suggestive of different dialogue, I'm very open to that. In fact, the opening sequence, which is a strange sequence that I really like, I think it's an interesting opening, came at the suggestion of one of the characters, Crispin, who plays the thief. She should have more of I suppose, an attachment to the natural world. So we don't do that linearly, of course, in a literal way, in a linear way. We do it in our way, make it a little bit a slant, as Emily Dickinson would say. But yeah, that came as her suggestion. It was a great suggestion, and we introduced the criminality, of
right from the get-go there. Because the opening shot, I recall, there's the idyllic lakeside area with the waving flag of crime scene tape just wafting semi-attached in the breeze there. Yeah. I'm gonna try to share my screen here because we got a couple stills from this item. Tell me, and all right, what do you see here?
That is the Geordie character. And she is the older of the two Dark Sisters. And here she is in a private moment of reflection. She's the one who hatches this idea of reunification with her sister. But in this private moment, she does have her doubts about, obviously what she's done. She's born of a crime, and she's been living this dual life. She wants to find a wholeness, or a sense of wholeness, that she's hoping that unification with her sister will give her. But as anyone who leads a double life or a life of secrets will always have doubts encrusted around their ambitions. Here she is, where those doubts are weighing her down pretty heavily.
Yeah, and we'll get to the second of the two Dark Sisters in a moment, but I wanted to ask just briefly, you've worked with this actor before. She was the lead in King Judith. If you can just briefly, how you two crossed paths and what brought her for this second go around with you.
Yeah, this is Nicole Fancher. Yeah, she was in King Judith. King Judith was thank you for mentioning that movie. Was that's a movie that its script changed dramatically owing to the pandemic at the time. We were making one sort of movie that fell away owing to we couldn't gather as crowds and do the crowd scenes that we had anticipated, and we couldn't make the movie that we wanted to make. We all wanted to be safe. We didn't know what was going on with the world, and the movie was on hold for a time. Once things got a little bit safer and vaccines were introduced, it occurred to me a way to the footage that we had shot before shutting down, a way to marry that together, to make a detective story of sorts. And I know that you've seen that movie, and Nicole just came in and saved it. I mean, we kept all of the footage that we shot before, and we made this detective story with her at the center of it, inserting her into the other. I realize I'm speaking abstractly. We're not really talking about the King Judith movie, but to answer your question, yeah, she came in late to a previous movie in such a way that I was grateful for. I thought she did a terrific job in it, and was impatient to work with her again. She's got some pretty strong filmmaking sensibilities in terms of continuity, which is great when you're making a movie like this. You don't have a script person when the actors can remember where they were or can ask a question. It's like, wait a minute, I think that our intention, with the dialogue was a little bit different or paced differently than what we're going now. She's terrific with that. And her co-star, Edna Gill, the first time working with her, and I'm persuaded she can do anything. Yeah, she was a theatrical background. I'd seen her in live theater in Dallas, and approached her as we do these days, I think through an Instagram message, and she was open to discussing more and looking at the script, and as the beneficiary of two strong lead performers. All the performances are terrific, and I think those two work really well together as the sisters.
Yeah, there's as needs to happen for the particular dramatic pursuits that you're exploring with this movie. So yeah, this picture up now is Edna Gill, and this is the second sister. I had them before I was able to figure out their names. I sat down and watched this without any background information other than that, I've spoken with you before, and here's the screener link. And so going into this, I knew that these two were the main characters. I initially described the first sister as the Fae sister, and this one was the more wide-eyed sister with certainly the visual look, but also mentality, a greater worldliness than the other sister manages to have.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
So these two did work very well together. I guess my mouse has us accidentally slipped to this dramatic image here. That looks like a sukkah shed behind the axe-wielding young woman there. I guess that's probably just some sort of grain barn thing, but
it's this magnificent old duck blind, that we found that was originally not going to be in our shot, but I found a sort of visual rhyme with that and the clouds, and the arc of the axe. I'm like, well, now we've got a feature in this, and actually we do like a scene. The two sisters are talking in it, based on the strength of its look, with the axe and with the clouds and with the tree line. It's like, to me, was an appealing and spooky sort of image. So there we've got our duck blind, which no one's a hunter in the movie. Well, I mean, no one's a duck hunter or a shotgun hunter in the movie. But you go with a good image.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, there's one. Yeah, I guess a sort of pedestrian question I had, because this is a contemporary film. Everyone, looks, modern day. We see car, we see phone. There's those wonderful little moving lazy boy things that go over water. I don't know what they're actually called, but they look very relaxing, and you just a hovercraft thing. But in the past flashback sequences, there's this unlikely mode of dress. Wondering if you might be willing to share a little bit what that might be about.
Yeah, the sisters, their fate was they come from a cultish background. It's not specified, but there is the suggestion of polygamy in this, and the suggestion too that women weren't allowed to read or to study. I think the heightened speech patterns and the fact that they both, once they escaped this background and went into literary endeavors, owes to what they were deprived when they were young. Both, I think, are hyper articulate at different points in the movie, or at least inventive, in the way that they describe their own ordeals and the ordeals of the other. So yeah, we wanted something that we didn't want to go into a lot of backstory. I wanted it to be, a very just more of a visual sense of what they came through. And so they have this exchange of what seems like a poem about a binding ceremony to this old Carl figure. They speak of a ceremony where where light is the principal feature of the symbol of oneness, and the various, spikiness of a candle flame when one squints one's eyes, or if you see headlamps in the background, that come through. And presents the various, I suppose, looks of a point of light, and they describe their ceremony and then the loneliness they feel, the single point of the candle, I guess, or the intensity of the light that makes their life untenable, with this guy, old Carl, and how they're basically, it looks like they're going to live the rest of their lives in his junk business, refurbishing old cars, and not able to read or not able to do much, and they they take matters into their own hands, which I found I was really pleased to shoot the sequence where old Carl gets his, and we did that, all it's musical. There's not a lot of dialogue.
Yeah,
and really cool montage. I felt
I like that.
In this image right here.
Yeah. And also there are animated sequences too. Yeah. I'm glad I remembered that, because that was a nice little flourish. There are not many of them, and none of them are terribly long, but they fit very nicely within the flow of the story as it's going. I'm curious what the inspiration behind that stylistic choice may have been.
They were written in all along. I had a little bit of animation, which I was really pleased with for King Judith, and I like that. I like it coming in, in just small places, not necessarily to illustrate, action that's on hand, but to provide, a little bit of tension, with the real world problems. In this case, it came into it because Caden, the more earthy sister, as you've observed, or the more the wide-eyed one, yeah. About her experiences is she makes her living writing anonymously body horror, very graphic stories that seem to sell pretty well. And so I wanted to, suggest something of what she was doing. The Lizzie character, who's kind of like Alice in Wonderland in a sense. She's in a situation that's larger and stranger than herself, and in this case, the rat, or the animal that she encounters seems cordial at first, but then is very, very different as the movie changes its tone more toward an aggressive type of pace. The animal changes its demeanor too.
Yeah, no, it was really neat to see that, and I quite liked, and I was kind of expecting this, having seen King Judith. This is a very woman-dominated film, story, images, nature. The four main characters are the two sisters, the thief, which is a woman, and the hunter, which is a woman. And I think I noted, and I may be mistaken here, the first line from a guy is old Carl's, "Hey," yeah. And I think that's his only line. So it's like
Yeah.
it goes, you're starting with the first 10, 15 minutes with this, and then all of a sudden this guy schmuck comes out of nowhere and demands attention on himself. And I thought, I don't know how intentional that effort may have been, but I thought it was amusing considering the tenor of the sort of quiet and smart intellectual thing going on with the reflections on life, on mind, on past, and then man in overalls raising his hand, demanding that we all give him a look.
Right. That's it. Yeah, you found the humor in that, and I'm pleased. But yeah, I mean, for working with all of the movies, the three that have gone to distribution, I've been very fortunate about this. 3 movies in 3 years. It's been quite a pace. A Ship of Human Skin, 2 female leads, and it's their movie throughout. Was released in 2020. King Judith came out in 2022. That's very much a women-led film. And now The Dark Sisters. All the what I consider the 4 principals. We mentioned Nicole Fancher, Edna Gill, but there's also Kristen Culinari, who plays the thief, and Christy Vela, who plays the hunter character. And back in I guess 2015 or 2016, I just remember a message by Natalie Portman, who anything that she says, I'm going to listen to. That women were ready to act. It was the Time's Up movement, and it seemed a shift, a welcome shift. And she was calling on filmmakers, and a lot of people were, and independently minded filmmakers to shift focus to women central characters. Now, I mean, I don't know that I'm necessarily telling women's stories, but that seemed about right to me. And I found immediately working with the theatrical actors, a lot of reluctance for women. I felt, I can't make a blanket statement about this. I want to be very careful of how I word it, but some reluctance for theatrical actors is, to go into movies, because one thing they could be, playing Chekhov's sisters, they could be playing, powerful characters out of Shakespeare. In the next minute in the movie, basically succumbing to male violence, in a low budget, kind of grindhouse homage, or a simple sort of not a very well developed romantic comedy or something, put together that might be. It's like, well, if you're going to choose, some of this great canonical plays, or move into something that, although more people
differently canonical, shall we say?
Yeah, differently canonical. Now, I mean, I love slasher movies. I'm not suggesting thing like that, but I mean that there's any sort of step down. But what you have to go through in order to be in an independent movie, you at least want the reward of dialogue that is impactful, a character that has a name. More than one emotion, fear, or a goggled-eyed view of the world. And so I just turned my attention toward trying to do that. And one has to be very pragmatic when one works with small budgets. And so this is something that I was applying myself to this type of storytelling immediately put me in touch with just terrific actors who were just, hungry to act on film in roles that were a little bit different, than other sorts of things that they've been asked to do on film before. And their commitment to it is just stellar, So that's, I suppose, my thinking with that. Perhaps not too in depth of thinking, but I just I know that I want to make good movies. I want to make interesting and different sorts of movies. And I find that my most adventurous collaborators in these sorts of movies are women.
You mentioning stories and this conversation here is bringing something to mind. There's an extended voiceover sequence concerning a certain myth about snakes, which I found absolutely fascinating. I was wondering, would you share what culture or folklore you might have found that marvelous description of behavior in?
Yeah,
I touch on it briefly so that our listeners and viewers might know a little bit of what I'm alluding to here.
Yeah, the hunter, who's a very interesting sort of character, and I like a lot. It tells us this poem that at first might seem like a non sequitur, but then the more she talks about the this poem, or the more she describes this sort of ritual or this practice that snakes have of hiding their hearts in lonely people, as a way of keeping them safe. A snake, the suggestion is in this myth, that a snake can live a certain amount of time without its heart. And because a snake, slithers on the ground, that its heart is susceptible, to injury. Doesn't want that. But one can approach a lonely person, insert the heart in that person, and it sort of goes unnoticed, and in some ways acts a ballast, maybe for the lonely person. And the poem is I hope, delightful in this logic, and also a bit alarming in the way that it goes. Before I was making movies, which as I'm doing now, which essentially started in 2013 in the prosumer, movement with cameras and video editing, equipment. I had my start working in 16 millimeter, back in the 90s, and it looks great. When one loves to work on film, it's impossible to afford, or it was for me. And so I was out of filmmaking for a long time, and I was a poet, and that working as a poet sort of satisfied that creative yearning, that filmmaking was giving me for a time. And it doesn't cost much to be a poet. It really
it doesn't cost much to be a poet. That's a t-shirt right there.
Yeah, you can just sort of do that. And this is a poem that I wrote years and years ago, and just sort of set aside for a time. And all of these movies are ways for me to revisit, some of these older poems that maybe didn't reach the light of day in publication. All my movies feature poems from an earlier version of myself when I was operating in a different medium. So this is the movie. I mean, in this movie, that poem, somehow I was reminded in the writing of the script that poem will fit this. And then I wrote it in such a way that what we were seeing, the types of movements and the types of interactions between the characters, all that stuff is scripted out, seemed to fit. And then the actor, Christy Vela, didn't even have any questions about it. He was just like completely into, she understood, how that poem ought to be delivered, and seemingly understood, everything about what it's, what it meant, to that character, what it meant to the audience, at this particular time that it's delivered in the movie. And she was just phenomenal at it.
Oh, no, so that's a Bailey original there. Fantastic. Yeah, that was
No, it doesn't exist as far as I'm aware, it doesn't exist in any sort of culture, any other.
Okay.
It was just a wild poem idea. Hey, these snakes, they put their hearts in lonely people, and let's put that in stanzas.
And there you go. And kids, it's that easy to be a poet.
And one day you'll be a filmmaker and insert.
And then, you'll. Well, that's wonderful, and actually that's seems a perfect moment to kind of wrap up here. We have a little bit of time left, but I want to make sure, I'll get back to you in 1 second, Richard. I want to make sure I tell everyone who's listening and watching about next week's episode. We will be talking to another pair of filmmakers, Veronica Payton and Andrew Rakich. My apologies if I mispronounced that, regarding the film The Sudbury Devil. So next week, more filmmakers from 366, but with us still now for a few more minutes, Richard Bailey. So now that Dark Sisters is available now for stream rental, I'm guessing, what's on your mind next? Have you taken any more working vacations, or?
Yeah, I'm impatient to start another one. I've got the script for it, and I've been talking with some actors. It's called Howler. It's about a poet on the eve of winning a major award. She's set to make this speech, but also her private life is descending into a sort of trance state. Reality is kind of melting into an apocalyptic vision. Oh. She now feels that she needs to share this apocalyptic vision with the world rather than her poetry. Her family, the people who are around her, the people who've been, supporting her in this career as a poet, are absolutely beside themselves. And we illustrate, to an extent, the apocalyptic vision that the poet's going to tell. Has she seen something, that she's meant to speak, or has living this life, this sort of counter life in the poetic realm of her own mind, away from, I guess, the day-to-day life, made some sort of switch into her mind. But is it real, or is it, a fantastical, or is it actually a prophecy? That's the sort of tension we're working with. And I feel like it'll be really visual. Again, a chance to put some poetry on film and to make something that's hopefully really unique.
Yeah, no, that sounds fascinating, and definitely a something of a departure from the Dark Sisters, certainly.
Yeah.
At least setting wise and implication wise, since Dark Sisters, I'd say, is very much about the past, and Dark Visions of the future are necessarily well, not the past there. So this, I'm looking forward to that. And of course, with your 7, 7, and 7 process, let's see, although there's a year working on the script, and then the 777 is roughly the timing I think I gleaned from you. So so sometime in 24 we may well
that's the plan. Yeah,
down again and talking about Howler. Excellent. Well, that's fantastic. Well, we already know your favorite hometown restaurant. We've shared a good deal of information about your latest feature, The Dark Sisters, streaming now, available to you, listeners and viewers of this program. And I think that wraps us up nicely. And we will have a comparatively short podcast for you this week, as opposed to the 2, 3, or 4 weeks where we have been going fully up to the 80-minute cap that we've got. So, Richard, it has been an absolute delight to co-host with you this afternoon and to discuss the Dark Sisters. And best of luck with your upcoming project there.
Thanks, Giles. I enjoyed it very, very much. Thank you.